In a moment, special 2-hour program with Dr. Christopher Holmes as we talk about human consciousness. Then the last hour will be pure open lines in our floating format. So get ready on Coast to Coast AM. Dr. Christopher Holmes is a clinical and forensic psychologist who has worked as a professor at York University in Toronto and also worked for several years in the Ontario Correctional System. He now dedicates himself full-time to Zero Point, an institute for mystical and spiritual science. Christopher has investigated the enigmas of human consciousness, the mysteries of the heart, paranormal and psychic phenomena, and the dynamics of the creation for more than 30 years. He also hosts a 2-hour bi-weekly internet radio show on Saturday afternoons. You might want to catch it, 1 to 3 p.m. Pacific time at www.bbsradio.com. Dr. Christopher Holmes, right here on Coast to Coast. Hello, Doctor. How are you?
Hi, George. Well, thanks.
Good to have you with us. Interesting that you have gotten into this field, which has always been of great interest to me, and you call it Zero Point. Explain that.
The term zero point is being used in modern physics as pertains to quantum theory and the idea that particles they move as waves of probability, and if you add up all the potent pathways of a particle through space, if you add up all the energies of those particles, those pathways, it turns out there's this huge amount of energy latent within the quantum vacuum or space itself. And so that's called the zero-point fields in physics today, okay? My use of the term zero-point, though, is actually based on Madame Blavatsky's book published in 1888 called The Secret Doctrine.
Yes.
And Blavatsky has this most unusual statement. She says, material points without extension, meaning a zero point, are the materials by which the gods and other invisible powers clothe themselves in bodies. Now, this is very peculiar, but what this is suggesting, according to the Secret Doctrine, any living being has a zero-point center.
And wasn't she described as the grandmother of all Western occultism?
Yes, yeah. Manly Hall described the Secret Doctrine as the magnus opus of the literature of the modern world.
And she was way ahead of her time, too.
An incredible woman who kind of traveled widely and wrote so extensively and was so widely studied in Eastern and Western mystical traditions. So in The Secret Doctrine, she says the Secret Doctrine isn't my teaching, it's the perennial wisdom teaching. But it's actually based on these stanzas of Zen, which she says go back, firstly in Tibetan Buddhist origin, but further she says go back to Atlantis. And the stanzas of Zen, book one of the Secret Doctrine, is called Cosmogenesis, and it deals with the creation or genesis of the cosmos, so the creation of the universe. So my most recent book explains the cosmogenesis and metaphysics of the Secret Doctrine that Blavatsky was articulating like over a century ago in 1888. And she predicted at that time, she said, no scientist will believe what I'm saying in this era, but in the century to come, they'll realize that Secret Doctrine has not been exaggerated or invented. And so my most recent work is the comparative studies of Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine and the newest concepts in modern physics concerning string theory and holographic theory.
I was going to say, how does she compare? I mean, here she was well over 100 years ago. How did her theories and ideas compare with modern science of today?
Absolutely astonishing, and I'll give you some for instances.
And she didn't have the equipment to work with. She didn't have computers. She had just her brain.
Well, I mean, she says that she drew from the ancient stanzas and the different esoteric traditions. But yes, it's incredible what she articulated. So some of the first points, like the first idea that she explained, is what today we call vacuum genesis. That before creation happened, in a way, everything was absorbed in non-being. There was, in a sense, nothingness, and that was the quantum vacuum. And the modern concept of the vacuum is that the vacuum isn't simply empty, but it's simultaneously the plenum, containing all possible particles and forces in a latent state. So that's the paradox of the void plenum, which is the quantum vacuum. Okay, that's a modern concept in physics. Now, back in 1888, Blavatsky was saying the same thing. She was saying space, which scientists think is empty, is only seemingly empty to the finite mind, but really it is the plenum containing all the forces and particles of nature in a latent state. So Blavatsky had that notion of creation out of nothingness, and that the root principles that are seemingly void or empty really are the plenum. So that was a first point of similarity.
And you believe this, Dr. Holmes, somehow all ties into the ability of the human consciousness to tap into what could be out there in the 0 point?
Well, let me come to the 0 point. I was saying about like vacuum genesis, and the next concept, and I'll tie it right back into consciousness studies.
All right.
The second point she says is that she said that the universe begins its differentiation from a point, which she called a 0 point. Now, in modern science, we now believe if you trace the universe back to its origin, it collapses back to a singularity, and that it emerged from a point source 10 to the minus 33 centimeters. That's at the Planckian length. Okay? So we now believe the universe emerged from an infinitesimally small point. Well, that, again, was what Blavatsky said in 1888. I mean, it's also what the Kabbalists have said for hundreds and even thousands of years. But Blavatsky said it in 1888. So this idea of the point source origination of the universe. Now, if we take the framework of Blavatsky's secret doctrine, you see, I explain how the microcosm and the macrocosm work on the same principles. So a human being is a microcosm and embodies the same principles of design and creation, I would argue, as embodied in the macrocosm, the universe. So just as Blavatsky says the universe came out of nothingness and it emerged from a point source, I would say similarly, human beings emerge out of nothingness, and that we have a 0 point center, which is the first, and that, in a way, that center of ourselves, in the Vedas, you would describe it as the Jiva Atma, meaning the individual self. In the Bhagavad Gita of India, Krishna says, I am the self seated in the hearts of all beings. And the idea is you have a Jiva Atma, which is like a spiritual spark centered within the heart space. So that, in a way, is your 0 point center, is this kind of spiritual spark within the heart, and there's a vacuum within the heart. I argue there's actually a physics to the human heart. And within the higher dimensions of the heart, you have a Jiva Atma, which is like a point source, and it's rooted into these 0 point fields in higher dimensional space. So I'm saying a human being works on the same physics you apply to the universe, I'm saying can be applied to understanding the emergence of human consciousness.
Can we assume, Christopher, that the 0 point may also be what some people call God, that point?
Well, in the Gita, to go back to the Bhagavad Gita, within the heart is said to be both the super soul and the Jiva Atma, the individual soul. Now, the super soul is infinitesimal. The individual soul is the super soul is infinite. The Jiva Atma is infinitesimal. So it's like a point source. It's a point of this and it throws off sparks. And each person has a spark of that God principle within themselves.
Are you saying we all have souls?
Well, this is actually above the soul even. I'm saying the 0-point source I would call a divine source emanation in higher dimensional planes. See, I believe we come down out of higher dimensions, okay, through higher dimensional space. And in Kabbalah, which is how I most understand it, it is said there are 4 worlds. They're called the world of emanation, the world of creation, formation, and the world made. So I'm saying similarly, a human being, you have a divine spark within you, a God spark. That's in the world of emanation.
All right.
Then that's brought down into the next dimensional world, and it becomes a spiritual self. Okay? And then that's brought down into the world of formation, which is the world of ensoulment. And then the last world is the body, the physical body. So I would say a human being has a physical body, a soul, a spiritual nature, and a divine nature. You have 4-dimensional nature, one within the other.
Most metaphysicians talk about the latter 2 for sure, maybe the third. Do they ever talk about the first one, the fact that we do come down from other dimensions?
That's in Kabbalah more. It's not discussed in the newer writings on consciousness and quantum theory and such. I don't know in other writings, I don't know of any contemporary consciousness writers arguing that we ourselves have 0-point centers as I do. Like other people are talking about the 0-point field and such, but they don't conceive that we ourselves have a 0-point center.
So what are you calling consciousness, human consciousness?
Good question. Okay, so to begin most simply, we all have an inner awareness of being. So in a general way, I'd call that consciousness, that inner awareness of being.
Some better than others.
We can have more of that or less of that. Like we can have more or less. We can be more conscious, and then there are levels or states of consciousness, which are more quantum jumps between levels of consciousness. So firstly, by consciousness, see, how I understand consciousness is very different from what's emerged in Western modern science. Firstly, in Western science, we identified consciousness with mental and cognitive functions, and we assumed that consciousness is produced by the brain and it's centered in the head. I call this the head doctrine. Okay? This is the main staple in modern times.
Sure.
The belief that consciousness is produced by the brain, and you have one mind and it's in the head.
Yet we believe, though, consciousness exists without the brain.
Well, yes. Yes, so do I.
Okay.
Okay, but I would argue, see, in all the spiritual traditions and in all esoteric psychologies, from Kabbalah to the secret doctrine to Judaism, Sufism, Christianity, the God principle or your higher self is really connected to the heart, not the head. In the Gita, they compare the heart is the sun of the body because you have this Jiva Atma, this self-illuminating element within the lotus of the heart. And it's the consciousness is the light of the self within the heart. So I actually identify consciousness with light, and that emerges out of the quantum physics of the heart. Now that consciousness of self then is distributed through the body, through the blood, and through the subtle anatomy. So I don't believe consciousness is just stuck up in the head, as most of the head scientists argue. I think consciousness, we can experience consciousness all through ourselves, and I think it's connected to blood flow.
Yeah, so you may be right about that.
Well, there are a lot of interesting individual observations of the person. Like if you examine consciousness in yourself, there are many observations you can make that demonstrate to you how you do feel consciousness all through yourself.
Why are some people, Dr. Holmes, so intuitive, other people are not? And, I find that on a regular basis all the time. What creates that?
Well, there are different types in life. Some people are more intellectually centered. Intuition is tied more to emotional center and tied more to the heart, I would say. Like I would say paranormal experiences involve more heart-to-heart connection rather than mind-to-mind connection. So some people are more emotionally centered and thus more intuitive, whereas other people more analytic.
Give me your theory, Christopher, on how you believe the universe truly started. Some will say it always was. Others, like Madame Blavatsky, talk about the point. I want to get your take on just how you think it started.
Well, I believe that there was this void plenum, this seeming emptiness, as simply in the book of Genesis. In the beginning, the earth was empty and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. So in a way, it comes out of a nothingness, and that there is this point source emergence, and then the universe grows within, without, like the budding of a lotus. So it grows. Space-time itself grows within, without. And eventually, I believe, it'll contract without, within, back to a 0 point and back into the nothingness. And I think that all creation is on that path.
And over and again, back and forth.
Endlessly, through eternity. So our universe is just one universe in the eons of time.
There's got to be an intelligence behind this.
Well, yes, I believe there is. Blavatsky, the way she approaches it, she says there's one omniscience that thrills throughout every finite point of the universe. So it's like there's one omniscience. That means there's one like infinite intelligence that permeates everything. Now, this is another concept which makes sense in terms of modern quantum theory. Like, I'm sure you've heard of the EPR paradox.
Yep.
And if you have particles in a singlet state and they separate, although those particles are separate from each other in space-time, they're still interconnected in what's called higher dimensional phase space. So that if you measure one particle and collapse its wave function, it instantaneously collapses the wave function of the second particle. So the point here is that the whole universe emerged out of a singularity state. So from the very beginning, everything in the universe remains interconnected in higher dimensional phase space. That information of the whole, in a way, permeates everything.
How does that explain the possibilities of a multiverse, many universes? Or does it?
Well, I think there's multiverses in different ways. Like, firstly, I believe that we exist on interpenetrating dimensions of being, such that if I died physically at the moment, I would continue to persist within the astral worlds. And if I died a second death in the astral worlds, I'd continue to live in the mental worlds. That we live in different dimensions simultaneously. So that's one way in which we have a multiverse. And in esoteric teachings, the world is seen as seven-dimensional. Blavatsky says 7 is the number of the divine mysteries. So there are 7 planes of being. Each of those is said to have 7 subplanes. That's why in Tibetan Buddhism they say there are 49 planes of existence. It's 7 by 7. And the human being has 7 chakras. Each chakra is related to one of these dimensions.
You reviewed our friend Dean Radin's new book, Entangled Minds. Let's talk about that when we come right back on Coast to Coast AM. Christopher, Dean Radin's new book, Entangled Minds. You praise his work, and then you're critical of his work. So explain that to us.
Okay, well, first on the complimentary note, it's an excellent review of a significant body of parapsychological research, and Dr. Radin takes on the skeptics in a really valuable way, and I really enjoyed the book. It's a really well-written book. He also explains the concept of entanglement in quantum theory and how this could provide a basis for understanding paranormal experiences and abilities. Now, where I take issue with the book, again, comes back to the issue of his understanding of mind as primarily centered in the brain, in the head, and that the brain in the head he assumes to produce consciousness and mind. And he says at one point, he says, the brain's electromagnetic fields are entangled with the rest of the universe, not because of direct contact, but because its fields interpenetrate within the energetic fields of everything else. Now here he's trying to explain how the brain is connected to the universe, but I'm arguing that if you want to consider a human being as a holographic system, you have to consider the whole human being. And the electromagnetic volume of the heart is really 5,000 times as great as the electromagnetic volume of the brain in the head. So I'm saying the center of a human being as a quantum system and as a system that's entangled with the environment is based more on the physics of the heart than it is on the brain, in the mind, in the head. So I'm complimentary because I think it was a valuable and excellent book, but then I take issue with how he assumes that the mind is only in the head, and that's, like the name of the book is Entangled Minds.
Mm-hmm.
I would write Entangled Minds and Hearts, because I think people are entangled more through the hearts than they are through the minds.
Now, you're a mystic and you're a forensic scientist. Let's explain this.
Well, I'm a psychologist
Mm-hmm.
and a clinical psychologist, and then I worked in prisons for 12 years. So I have experience in forensic legal settings and in courts and detention centers and so on. So that's my background, but my lifelong interest has been in the psychology of consciousness, and I'm interested in the science of it and the science of the mystical teachings. When I worked in prisons, I was able to apply and develop a new model of offender rehabilitation based on this work. Because today in corrections, the main approach is cognitive behavioral. And the idea is that you alter the cognitions to effect behavioral change. But see, in all of modern psychology, there is no psychology of the heart and soul. So I developed something called Awakening of Consciousness and the Heart in criminal offenders, because I think the root cause of criminal activity is the deadening and restriction of the heart, and that people lose their essence feeling in the heart, and that's when they turn to violence and have such other life issues.
Some of the things that you have worked on, I mean, do you believe that there is life after death, Christopher?
Yeah, I believe we live in a multi-dimensional universe, yeah, that we have different bodies, we can exist in different planes in afterlife realms. And in a way, your afterlife conditions are determined by your psychological makeup, because it'll tend to correspond to your current psychology.
What do you believe that afterlife is? Another dimension? What's the process?
There are other dimensions at different vibrational frequency ranges within the zero-point fields of the quantum vacuum. Yeah. So they're at more subtle vibrational levels that those worlds appear solid to people within those worlds, just as ours seemingly do to us. I mean, even science shows us that, in a way, the solidarity of physical reality is an illusion. Really, everything is primarily emptiness, and it creates the illusion of solidarity because of the effects of scale and such. But mostly everything is emptiness. And it's like shifting the angle of a projection of the light, and you'd reveal a different reality that is within the same space, but within a different frequency range.
Give me a percent of how you believe modern science understands these very strange things that are going on in this universe.
I don't think modern science understands them at all. At all. I think they have fundamentally different, wrong ideas. I think they have a completely wrong idea about what the nature of consciousness is. They have no concept of the self within the heart as actually having a physics to it. Most scientists are dismissive of all the evidences of paranormal phenomena, which really prove overwhelmingly, in my view, that we live in a multidimensional universe. Like, I consider there to be significant scientific evidence for ESP, psychokinesis, presentience,
Sure.
out-of-body experience, ghosts, poltergeists. All of these things have been documented for hundreds of years. There's so much, not only evidential, anecdotal evidence, but also scientific investigations. So I think the case is overwhelming. I think it's been made. We just haven't been advanced enough to develop models to explain, okay, how can this be working now? And that's what we need to do now.
Isn't it a shame that it just seems to be escaping science?
Well, I think it's almost intentional in a way. I think.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's these skeptics are. I think we have a new form of what I would call new think, and it's almost like an intentional effort to undermine the value and significance of religious or spiritual teachings, and offer us this what I would call pseudo-scientific view instead. So I think it's almost intentional. And it's kept out of the school. It's like Dean Radin says in his book. He says, you know, in the world there are maybe 50 people, scientists investigating paranormal phenomena, but it's like one of the most profound areas of psychology, whereas you have thousands of psychologists investigating trivial little issues in different parts of social psychology or personality theory. Everyone ignores the most critical issues. It's almost like there's been a that the church used to prevent the advancement of science. And then it's like certain dogma became established in science, and they prevented the investigation of these areas. I mean, the CIA and people like this are more interested in it because of its possible applications. I mean, a lot of the Stanford research and such, it was done by intelligence agencies.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it was kept out of the, it's like you don't want it in the universities. People might be interested in it. Like on my site, I did an internet survey last year of 13 Canadian universities, and I wrote each university a letter saying, is there anyone in your department who teaches anything of mystical or spiritual psychology or studies paranormal phenomena or researches consciousness?
I bet you probably got almost zero.
I got zero.
There
wasn't one professor out of 600. There wasn't one mainstream course on those subjects. But from my view, like, those are the most profound, essential issues of psychology. But it doesn't fit into a behavioral paradigm, so it's been ignored, and that's why I think science has made such fundamental mistakes.
Tell me a little bit about the Institute for Mystical and Spiritual Science, part of 0 Point.
Well, mainly it's myself, and I have 6 books. I've worked at these for 30 years. I continue to refine them and develop new material. I have my website. I give talks and seek opportunities. My work, I would say, is relatively unknown. I don't have a major publisher yet. And it's just I'm really dedicated. I think modern psychology is so off base with such fundamental misunderstandings, and I think we need to try to synthesize more progressive understanding of science with the ancient mystery teachings. I accept the existence of paranormal phenomena. I've had numerous paranormal experiences through my life, and so, I've striven to understand what these things are. That's why I've been drawn into this area of study.
Of everything you've studied so far, Christopher, what to you seems to be the most mind-boggling? Just very, not necessarily perplexing or puzzling, but almost something you look at in awe. What might it be?
The kind of model, in terms of ideas, well, Blavatsky's concept of 0 points and this idea of how we come down out of higher dimensional space, like to understand what that really means, not just in words, but to also understand it somewhat in your experience and being. Then the of Jacob is a model of the structure of the quantum vacuum. That's essentially what it is. It's a model of the higher dimensional nature of space. So some of these mystical symbols, as you understand them, they're profoundly valuable. And in a way, you can experience aspects of this.
You're a believer in extraterrestrial life?
Well, there's so many questions. We sure have a universe full of mystery, hey, George.
Yes,
I listen to your show and all the different angles and insights and questions in this area. I definitely believe that there are aliens, and I believe in the existence of UFOs, and I'm trying to understand how and what that involves, and it's very complex and subtle. And then in another sense, I believe that even we ourselves are extraterrestrial. And what I mean by that is terrestrial means like earthly. So I believe that the inner self comes down out of higher dimensions. So I would say, in a way, our higher self is in the sun now, okay? But in a way, we come down from the sun into the material body. And when we die, the body goes back to the earth, but the inner man or inner being persists, and that we ourselves could return into the sun.
Is that why you say that when people have these near-death experiences where they seem to be going through a tunnel to a light, you think it's the sun?
Yes. And it's interesting. I had the opportunity a year or two ago to talk with Raymond Moody about this in Montreal. And I went up and we had this discussion, and I asked Dr. Moody that exact question, because I think it is the sun. And I asked him, I said, Dr. Moody, you know how everyone says they go down to this tunnel into a realm of light? And he said, yes. And I said, do you think that could be the sun? And he pondered it, and he said, yes. And then I reminded him, because he likes Greek philosophy so much, of the myth of Plato. You know the Plato myth where people are tied in an underground den and they see the shadows against the back wall and they think that's reality. And they have to, learn to turn around to look into the light. And they have to grow accustomed to the light to be able to turn around and see true existence. And at the end of the parable, Plato says, and last of all will he see the sun, and is in his own proper place and not in another. So I reminded Dr. Moody of that from the Plato myth, and he was, oh my goodness, like it gave a different angle on that.
Well, it is interesting that so many people say the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, if we look around us in the world and we say, okay, well, if I were to travel down a tunnel into a realm of light, where's there a realm of light? Well, it would be the sun. But it would be I think the sun is a level of spiritual being, a spiritual world, that you live there in a sense in your fire body, like your spirit body. We come down from the sun and we can return to the sun. In India, they have something called Surya Yoga, which is the yoga of the sun. It's said that we're all born of the sun. We're sons of the sun, and we want to reattain to the sun.
Do you believe that there are beings living in other dimensions right now?
Well, yes.
Like we talk about shadow people all the time, and I believe they may be from another dimension somehow. I mean, do you think things like that exist?
Yes. Yeah.
You do?
Yeah. Yeah, I think there are all kinds of beings. See, in a way, I think there are all kinds of beings and dimensions interpenetrating our own, but it's like you can take holographic images and you shift the light a little bit and you have different wave fronts on the same medium, and you shift the laser light and it projects different images, and all these dimensions are on the same piece of film. And I think reality is like that. If you could shift your consciousness, you could realize there are other beings or dimensions within your own space.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I even believe there are beings that work through these. I believe there are beings that, in a way, are multidimensional beings that can possess or inhabit people acting through the subtle dimensions.
How do you prove this, though? How do you put it together, the evidence, or is it just all theory?
Well, I mean, there are all kinds of evidences for all kinds of paranormal phenomena. In a way, I don't even bother with the evidences anymore because I realized at one point that, in a way, there's already overwhelming evidence, and really, for people who are skeptical, no matter what evidence they ever had, it's not going to change their mind because it's like a fixed stance that they have. So I became more interested not in asking how to prove it, or I'm interested in the science of how it might work. So I'm less, it's not, I'm just trying to gain understanding in my own experience rather than trying to prove it to someone.
But how does it work? That's the question. I'm not sure we have answers for that.
Well, no, we don't. I'm suggesting things I think are really important about trying to understand the models of higher dimensions. I think that's really important.
I mean, do you think, that, for example, that when people die, that this soul, you believe in ghosts, right?
Yeah.
Okay. They just haven't moved on yet.
Yeah.
What about those who have moved on, those spirits, those souls that are gone? Where do they go?
Okay, well, I think there are different places souls can go. Some people say souls can pass to the moon. Lower souls who haven't evolved pass to the moon.
John Lear thinks there's a storage shed of souls up there.
Yeah, and other people have described, Adi Da describes beings there that feed off human souls. Gurdjieff says when anything organic dies, at certain energy, soul energy feeds the moon. So people might pass to the moon, they might haunt the earth. I believe the paradise worlds are in the levels of the upper atmosphere. And then I believe there are these spiritual worlds in the sun. I believe there are worlds related like on the planets, but in the astral realm.
But there are levels that could be very dangerous for people to be in, right?
Yes, and yes. Yeah, I mean, I believe in the existence of hellish-type realms that people can be drawn into.
Remember the movie Ghost?
That was an amazing movie, yes.
Those creatures that would come up when somebody had died?
Yeah.
They'd grab them and take them. Well, stay with us, Christopher. We're going to open up the phone lines for you next hour. It's our final hour with you. So take advantage, and we'll continue chatting with him. I've still got some questions for him. But we'll take your phone calls next hour as well. I'm George Norrie. This is Coast to Coast AM. How important for you to understand all this was your training as a forensic psychologist, let's say?
Well, absolutely against everything I've learned. In fact, everything I learned in the mainstream of modern psychology, I now regard as wrong, fundamentally mistaken. Like, psychology today is defined as the science of behavior and the mind. They have no psychology of the heart and soul. They have the complete wrong understanding of consciousness. They have the wrong understanding of the nature of self. They don't think we have a self. They think the self experience is produced up in portions of the cortex rather than there being any self within the heart. So I see the whole of mainstream modern psychology as fundamentally mistaken.
All right, let's go to some of the calls here. Here's east of the Rockies. You're on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi, George.
Yeah,
and hi, Mr. Holmes. How are you?
Good.
Great show. I was calling. I wanted to tell you that as soon as you started talking about the sun, I ran to get an old map that a friend and I made when I started following a yogic path in my early 20s, and we made a little graphic of the different spiritual regions as you go from the physical to the Anda and Brahman and Parbrahm and on, and basically they had 7 spiritual regions.
Yeah.
But they mentioned, like the different lotuses that you would go through, and those were also suns. and there was a red sun, say in the Parbrahm, the third spiritual region, that was a four-petaled lotus. And I wondered if you had thought about the different kinds of suns that might be something the soul would travel through or become one with.
Yeah, I see the main sun where you kind of disappear through something, a portal that opens up into a higher dimensional space. So I believe there are portals between these different levels. And there, as you say, there's a sun, but then I would say the sun behind the sun. It's sometimes referred to as the invisible sun. The starry world is beyond the sun.
Well, that sounds very similar. And I did want to ask one other question. Just a year or two ago, we had planetary alignments, and I wondered if you thought that might have bearing on opening up portals as well, or opening up consciousness, even though that's more of a physical thing than that we would feel rather than a heartfelt thing, or would that you combine that somehow?
Well, I would combine them, and I mean, I believe the planets and astrology affects our essence. Like, the most important thing, I think, in astrology is the structure of the elements and understanding what kind of element you are, and I believe our essence is interconnected to the planetary life, that influences us in the subtle dimensions.
Well, thank you. You have a good night.
Yeah, thanks for your questions. A good question.
Next up, first-time caller line. You're on Coast to Coast with us. Hi there.
How's it going?
Good. Go ahead.
Dr. Holmes, I worked for Sean Fisher, who I know interviewed you for his documentary Metaphysics earlier this year.
Yeah, that was great fun. How's the movie coming along?
I think it's coming along quite well. I haven't talked to him for a couple of weeks, but I'm wishing him good luck. I think it's coming along just fine. But my question for you is, we're talking about changing our consciousness here, and I'm trying really hard to do that, and I was just wondering what advice you have to help in that process.
And what do you mean by changing your consciousness?
I guess just aligning with the universe a little more, or I don't know.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
I mean, that's exactly. See, I see most. We want to learn to live in the consciousness of the heart. So as you go about your day, try to remember to come back to being present here now, wherever you are, and connect with your breathing. Your soul life is connected to your breath. There's 4 levels to your breath and 4 levels to your soul. So when you come back, just being present and connect with your breath. And I tap myself over the heart space sometimes, so I can feel that brings my attention to that area. And try to experience yourself being in your heart. Your heart space is empty in ways. In a way, in mystical teachings, there's a form of nothingness at the heart of being. In a way, there's a vacated space within your heart. This is described in Kabbalah and Judaism. There's a hollow within the heart. So in a way, we want to center in the heart. So I actually tap myself over the heart and try to be centered in my heart space. And the mystics say self-realization, which is the attainment of the next level of awakening, involves the dissolution of the false mind into the lotus of the heart. So more and more, in a way, the turning of the mind is an obstacle to consciousness. You want to lessen or still the turning of the mind and learn to be more centered in your breath and tap yourself over the chest, try to feel awakened in your heart. And remember yourself. I practice self-remembering, meaning as I go about my life, I make efforts every day to be waking up here and waking up there to try to increase my wakefulness and build on that.
Christopher, have you read or are you aware of the book called The Book of Urantia?
Yeah, I have it. I can see it in front of me here right now.
I was going to,
but I hope to.
I don't know if I'm remote viewing and saw the book there, or I'm guessing because some of your thoughts are pretty poignant in that book. Very similar.
I want to explore that. That's one of the mystery books that I just haven't yet had time to come to.
Okay, I think you'll be fascinated by it.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah.
Let's go west of the Rockies. You're on Coast to Coast with us. Good morning.
Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Hi, I had a question for Christopher.
Sure.
I was listening earlier how you were saying how the heart connects with the mind and to the spirit. I had a heart transplant 2 years ago, and I was curious why if that's the case, why wouldn't I have noticed a lot of changes in my mind and thinking and whatnot?
Yeah, well, I think your memory is really in the more subtle fields, information fields, that the heart, it's not in the actual matter of the heart, but it's in the subtle fields that interpenetrate the heart. So your memory is in this deeper field information. So even though your heart might be replaced, I mean, there are a lot of paranormal experiences that people have with heart transplants. Did you have any of those type experiences?
Such like?
Have you ever read Sylvia Browne's book called A Change of Heart?
No.
Well, you might look at that, and it's reported a number of people have written about this. Where someone receives someone else's heart, but they have experiences that connect them to the donor, or visions of the donor, or it changes their own psychological makeup. She's one lady who's written about this. It's discussed also in The Heart's Code by Paul Pearsall. But it's a good question, and I don't really want to pretend that I understand all these mysteries. I'm still an explorer and trying to understand it, but it's a good question. Why doesn't changing the heart then change our personal identity and memory? And I'm saying it's because that is more established in the 0-point fields. And that the material heart is changing, but the deeper, the psychical heart is still your own psychical heart.
There have been some incredible stories, Christopher, of people who have had transplants, organs, of course, from people, and who have passed on in most cases. And people generally take on either their personality or get some sights. It's been made into a couple great movies.
Yeah.
But it's very strange.
Yeah, it shows in a way that the heart donated by someone still seems connected to the soul life of that person. That's what it suggests. And it happens with other organs. I mean, sometimes I think transplanted kidney, it can affect your food preferences and things. We don't really understand memory, where memory is stored. In a way, memory seems inherent actually to matter. Like within matter. It's like where you're having Sheldrake on tomorrow. He's such an important theorist, and actually, his model is like there's this group mind, and that's in the subtle fields. So the memory is really in the subtle fields. It's not that memory is recorded in cell assembly somewhere in the brain. It's more that it's inherent to within the nature of matter.
By the way, that book, A Change of Heart, it's Claire Sylvia.
It's Claire Sylvia.
Not
Thank
Sylvia
you.
Brown.
Thank you. Good.
Of course, Sylvia's written so many books. I thought maybe that was possible, too. Let's go to our wild card line. You're on Coast to Coast. Hi there.
Hi there. I'm calling for Christopher.
Yeah, go ahead.
Nice to hear a Canadian doing such important work. I wanted to bring up about the holographic universe. I've heard people talk about the holographic universe and that we're all part of this whole. I've studied the making of holograms, and what doesn't seem to be brought forward is the aspect of the viewer's unique perspective of that whole, or that the person's unique perspective of the universe might be due to their heart resonance frequency, or like you were saying, like the zero field that's unique to them. And when you make a hologram, there's two different kind of basic types. There's transmission and there's projection holograms. And again, people don't really refer to or bring that aspect when they talk about the holographic universe. And I kind of think, that's the difference between projection and transmission when we're kind of talking about psychology. And I was wondering if you had a take on this, and I'll hang up and listen off the air. Thanks.
Well, no, hold on.
Still there?
Interesting question. And one thing in response to Talbot's book and the holographic paradigm in general is that most of the people who use the holographic paradigm don't think there is any interior source of coherent light. Like when you do holographic photography, you have a laser light, and that provides a source of coherent light. Now, Carl Friedman says there are no laser beams in the head. No, none of the holographers think that we have an interior source of coherent light. So when I say there's a Jiva Atma within the heart, this is a source of coherent light, which is the basis for creating holographic experience.
Yeah,
that's not in Talbot. Talbot also doesn't have this concept of there being a coherent light source. Now, I haven't really answered your question, but I wanted to bring that up. Sorry.
Oh, no, the other part was the transmission and projection holograms, like on psychology.
See, I think creation is projected around the central point out of the physics of light within this vacated space in the heart, and reality is spun around that. It's hard really to explain it. Because it's a very complex kind of subject. So the difference between, I think our reality is projected around the central point.
Explain that.
And we're lit up from within, without.
Explain that.
Well, it's like Blavatsky says, the 0 points are the materials by which the gods and other invisible powers clothe themselves in bodies. I say at the core of your being, you have a 0 point center, and around that's surrounded by different bodies which are created out of the quantum vacuum due to the spin properties of your monadic essence. I mean, I haven't had time to... I believe that we have a monadic essence that exists in 7-dimensional hyperspace. And this has certain spin properties, and the spin properties of that monadic essence is like a Kalubi-Yau space in modern physics. It creates material bodies surrounding that central point. And it's the interaction of light emerging from within that illuminates the matters of these different bodies.
East of the Rockies, your turn. Hi there.
Hey, my name's Thor. I'm calling from Warsaw, Kentucky.
Hello, Thor.
I wanted to touch on that Urantia book thing you were talking about.
Sure.
When I read the Urantia book, it talked about a guy called Melchizedek.
Yes.
He sent a teaching mission all across the earth. And I said to myself, well, if he did that, there's got to be proof. Well, 20 minutes after I read this in the Urantia book, there was a story on CNN. They said they found a giant rock in the middle of Los Lunas, New Mexico. It's over 6,000 years old, and it has the 10 Commandments carved in a combination of ancient Hebrew and Greek.
Whoa.
And I just wanted to turn you on to that fact, and I wanted to thank you for having the show.
You are welcome, Thor.
Everything this guy's saying is just turning me on completely.
Thanks. Boy, I'll look out for that.
That was a interesting story. And
yeah.
It's you never know what has gone on.
No, there's so many unknowns. Really, just about human history and our origins and extraterrestrials. There's just so many unknowns.
Well, and the greatest unknown, of course, Christopher, is the universe. And whether there's multi-universes or just one, multi-dimensions or just what we are in, it's very perplexing because I think it all leads back to some kind of intelligent design. It just doesn't happen by accident.
No, I absolutely agree. I think I believe in intelligent design, that there's creative life principle, and I mean, I believe that not only there's intelligent design, but it's actually that design manifests the formula, the 1 is divided by 3 to give 7. Just like the Godhead has a triune nature and creates 7 planes of being. So the 1-3-7 principle, I think, is a fundamental principle of intelligent design that's evident in all phenomena of nature.
Does physics prove any of this?
Well, I mean, take the physical world. What's it composed of? Protons, electrons, and neutrons, 3 types of particles, and 7 rows of elements in the periodic tables. Okay?
And maybe a few more we don't even know about.
There's 1, 3, 7. Take light. Divide light by a 3-sided prism, gives you a spectrum of 7 colors. See, they're both examples of the 1, 3, and 7. If you look at particle families in physics, there are 3 main particle families: hadrons, leptons, and gluons, which are the messenger particles. It's 3 main families of particles. Each of those exist in 3 dimensions. So really, yeah, again, it's these laws of 3 and 7. I studied these in the area of science because most scientists always think dualistically, like they think there's matter and energy. Well, now in the new science, there's not only matter and energy, there's also information, which is latent within the medium. So it's called third force science. Dean Radin talks about this. It's called and Talbot does. It's third force science, that information is latent within space. So whereas we always saw things dualistically, now we're arriving at the idea of the triunity of nature.
Okay, your website, of course, is zeropoint.ca because you're in Canada, zeropoint.ca. We'll be back with final phone calls with Dr. Christopher Holmes, and then next hour, open lines. Christopher, tell me your next projects, by the way.
I haven't thought about that. I've been doing a series of reviews. To explain what I teach, I'm starting to do critiques of other people's work to contrast my own work with theirs. Like I'm doing a critique of The Secret. I'm doing a critique of Down the Rabbit Hole.
Tell me about your thought of The Secret, because that's a hot movie right now.
Well, I think there are elements of value in it, but I mean, to consider that is the secret is completely fanciful, and there are far deeper secrets. In fact, most mystical teachings, they're concerned with how do we get beyond this level of reality created by all these attractions and repulsions, like how do we get free of this matrix of creation. And in a way,
do you think it was well done? Did it get the message across?
You
hesitated.
Well, got different messages. I think there's far too much focus that it's just our thoughts that create reality. Like I see us as 3-brained beings. We function mentally, emotionally, and physically. Okay, so like to create your own reality, it's not just a matter of thinking and conceiving it. It's also the emotional aspect of it, because the thought is given form within the heart. In Kabbalah, the heart is that which gives form to the attributes. So it needs to be a combination of the thoughts and the emotional center, and then also the physical action. So I think for people to manifest things, you want to, it's the thinking, feeling, and action, all 3 components. The fellow on Oprah stressed that when he spoke of The Secret. He talked about the threefoldness of the process. In other ways, I thought the movie focuses far too much on kind of materialistic goals and enhancement of ego and money and status and such, rather than mystical goals, which is really surrender of the egoic nature to realize your deeper self. And that's a far more deeper and secret process.
All right, more calls. Let's go to our wild card line. You're on Coast to Coast with us. Hi there.
Evening, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Michael from Columbus, Ohio.
Thank you, Michael.
I lived in Columbus a year there. I worked at Upham Hall.
Oh, I got about 4 inches of snow on the ground and 2 inches on top of ice.
Oh, dear. I think it's coming this way, too.
Yeah. The thing I wanted to ask is I heard a caller call in earlier about a heart transplant.
Yeah.
And what I didn't hear him ask is about the artificial heart, a heart that's not real at all. It's mechanical. How does that fit in with your view?
Well, see, I'm saying that really the heart has different dimensions to it, okay? That the physical heart, psychical, spiritual, and then the ultimate divine element within the higher dimensions of the heart. So although a person might have the physical heart replaced by a mechanical device, it's still within the space of the heart. Like the essential heart center is what I would call the bliss sheath, which is...
So it's not the heart you're talking about, it's the area of the heart. It's like the center of chi.
Yeah. Yeah, it's in the physics of the 0-point fields. Okay, but that sustains the heart. Normally, your own psychical heart ensouls your physical heart. But if the heart's removed and you have a mechanical device, your psychical heart is still there. It would be very interesting to examine the feeling qualities of people who have had a mechanical heart inserted. It likely takes some time to feel their feelings as fully for a while.
Yeah.
But I imagine that would be restored, though, over time. I don't know. That would be my...
So what you're saying
see, in psychology, people don't today even think you feel feelings in your heart. They think you feel feelings up in your head, in the limbic system. They don't. There's no psychology of the heart. But how many people go and tell your loved one, I love you with all my head? People don't. In a way, we know we feel feelings in the heart. There's no understanding of how that actually works.
So your theory is then that even with the mechanical heart, that somehow through time, the body replaces the soul within that energy field that's there, whether it be mechanical or not.
The soul, the ensouling heart influence is still there. Yes. And I believe the body is ensouled through the action of the heart, through the infusion of soul energies into the blood. And it's related to the process of oxygenation. Your soul is connected to breathing. Like in Genesis, God breathes into man a living soul. So the heart and soul action are both connected to what I'm saying is your true self, this heart center in higher dimensional space.
Okay.
There's a physics to it. It's a complex subject, but I've tried to introduce aspects of it.
Let's go west of the Rockies. You're on Coast to Coast with us. Hi there. Hello.
Oh, good evening, gentlemen.
Hey, go ahead, please.
Thanks for a very, very interesting broadcast.
You are welcome.
Well, first I want to ask, Dr. Holmes, I have in my hand a book I'm reading tonight, and it's called The Voice of the Heart by Neil Cohen. And are you the same gentleman, are you the same person, Dr. Holmes, that wrote the foreword to this book?
Yeah, I did.
Serendipity to hear your voice as I put the book down.
Oh yeah, it was some valuable work in that, and yeah.
I appreciated your comments about the blood as a stream of consciousness, and I'm sure you're familiar with the monograph that Rudolf Steiner did also on the blood as a sacred stream.
No, I'm not. It's a type of material. If I saw that, I would read that.
Oh, love it. You would love that. It's easy to find. You can get it online.
Okay,
but
I'll look to that.
My reason for calling to ask you a question, if you haven't already answered it, I hope you haven't. I missed your first 20 minutes. Is I've always, I haven't heard you use the term Sacred Heart, which is a term that I've always used, and I've always considered the Sacred Heart to be located within the etheric body, and I'm wondering, where do you fall on that one?
Well, I would say I'm saying it's multidimensional. The way I understand the etheric body is between the physical and then the higher being bodies, the astral, mental, and beyond. So the etheric body your etheric aura extends about a quarter inch past your body, and it's kind of gray striated. The etheric body is not too important, really. I'm saying the heart center has a much deeper physics into 0-point fields existing within the quantum vacuum. So it's far beyond the etheric body. It's rooted into, just like our universe, our huge universe emerged from a point. I'm saying you have a deep, deep heart center rooted into the quantum vacuum, rooted into the grounds of being.
Is there any kind of machinery that can start registering some of this?
That's a very interesting question. I don't know. I'm not. I would think so. I mean, it's the electromagnetic phenomena. I'm saying there's this bliss sheath I would describe in the heart. I would describe it as a mass of unemergent light, so that there may be ways of detecting, if not that, at least its influence. I really don't know. It's an interesting question.
All right, next up, let's go to our East of the Rockies. Welcome to Coast to Coast. You're on the air with us. Hi there.
Hi.
Yeah,
how you guys doing
we
tonight?
Are fine, thank you.
Good. Great. I've been listening to the show for years. It's funny that you guys are talking about a lot of the same books that I have. I was just, I heard you, or was it Art, talking to J.J. Hurtak, and I have the Keys of Enoch right here, too, in the Urantia book. And I just wanted to tell Christopher, I'm a huge heart being. My heart sometimes throughout my life has almost even gotten in the way.
Yeah.
But in the same token, though, I have been able to have out-of-body experiences. I've had experiences with extraterrestrial beings, and in a lot of ways, to hear somebody like you talking about these things, I just start, vibrating immediately. And,
it brings it back, the feelings of it. Yeah.
And so I just wanted to tell you that ever since I was a very young boy, I memorized this poem, and to the best of my memory, it's from the book of Ban Shu Kai. I don't know if that rings any bells with you.
No, it
but,
doesn't.
The poem goes like this, if you don't mind me telling it to you real quick. There are those misguided persons in the world who will see you harmed. They will confront you with fists or await you in the darkness with their blades drawn. Do not fear them or become angry with them. Allow your heart to hold the emptiness of purity, and your receptive spirit will hear the sadness and rage of your attackers' intentions. You will take them to the destruction they seek. And that's the poem. But
there's a way in which the more your heart is emptied, the more your consciousness is expanded into a volume of space or extends into the surrounds.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful poem. It had a beautiful line in there, the space in the heart of purity.
To hold the emptiness of purity. That's always
the emptiness. In a way, we want to empty our hearts. There's this emptiness at the heart of being, but everybody's got all these desires that you have to empty them out, and the more you empty that space in the heart again, then in a way that establishes the basis for states of samadhi, or expanded consciousness. States of samadhi have to be based on an awakened heart.
Sure.
You don't want to kind of open, let's say, your brow chakra immediately, because you get lost into the netherworlds.
All right, so much so, Dr. Christopher Holmes, thank you so much. Where do you get the book, 0 Point Teachings?
I'm afraid that they're only accessible through me, through the website, and at least at this time.
0point.ca.
Yeah.
All right, great. Christopher, thanks so much for being on the program. When I come back, we've got a pure hour now of open lines for you.